In the post-pandemic world, talk of rising inflation and what to do about it has dominated the news media and dramatically impacted the finances of ordinary people everywhere. But what is it? Put simply, inflation is the rate at which the average prices of goods and services rises. When price rises outstrip growth in wages, the purchasing power of money is reduced in real terms. Context is everything, and healthy inflation needn't cause pain. Most central banks aim to keep inflation at around 2%. But sometimes inflation exceeds this for a sustained period of time, and people begin to experience diminishing spending power and living standards fall. As expendable incomes are reduced, businesses can experience a drop in revenues, perpetuating the misery. But what causes inflation to happen in the first place? As with most phenomena, it's usually a number of converging factors that drive inflation. Demand pull is a phenomenon that occurs when demand for goods and services exceeds supply. If consumers are buying more than the economy can produce, or more than producers anticipated would be needed, businesses raise prices to balance supply and demand. Some would argue that the housing crises experienced in many parts of the world post-2008 is an example of demand pull inflating prices. Much is made of the spiralling costs of housing in London and New York, but cities as far and wide as Vancouver, Hong Kong and Sydney have surpassed them in terms of unaffordability. Conversely, it's also worth noting that prices can collapse if supply exceeds demand, as happened with the price of oil in April 2020, following the Russia-Saudi Arabia oil price conflict. Cost push means that the cost of production increases and producers are passing those costs on to consumers. This can happen due to rising wages, higher costs for raw materials, or increased energy prices. In the last few years, it's fair to say that we've probably seen all three of these converging to influence cost-push inflation. In our globalised economy, events like natural disasters, wars or pandemics can disrupt the supply of goods, increasing scarcity and causing prices to rise. Given the events of the last 5 years, it's easy to feel that the inflation surge of 2021 to 2023 was unavoidable. The wars in Ukraine and Gaza and the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic continue to wreak havoc with prices globally. Away from these major headline events, anxieties have grown over the stability of the trade route through the Suez Canal following a series of incidents. Whilst there is a general consensus in contemporary economics in favour of the cost-push theory of inflation, it has had a few famous critics over the years. Milton Friedman, along with his fellow monetarists, believed that inflation was largely driven by an excess of money in general circulation, rather than the factors that I've talked about previously. Friedman's idea gained real traction in the early 1980s, with Ronald Reagan in the US and Margaret Thatcher in the UK in particular favouring his views and adopting policies along monetarist lines. Money supply is controlled by central banks, and if they increase the supply of money through things like lowering interest rates or other stimulus measures, it can lead to inflation. More money in the economy can lead to increased spending, which further pushes up prices. Ultimately, inflation is far more complex than can be reflected in 5 minutes, but I hope this video has given you some grounding in the factors that can drive it.